What if the biggest obstacle between you and the life you dream about isn't a lack of talent, money, education, or opportunity? What if, without ever speaking a word, you've already agreed to live a smaller life than you're capable of? And what if that agreement is so quiet, so ordinary, and so deeply woven into your daily routine that you've mistaken it for reality? Stay with this thought, because once you recognize it, you'll never be able to look at your choices the same way again. Most people believe they make one decision at a time. They imagine success is built from dramatic moments, one bold leap, one lucky break, one life-changing opportunity. But the hidden truth is far more unsettling. Long before success or failure becomes visible, an invisible contract is already being signed. Not with ink, not on paper. It is written through repeated choices, silent compromises, and the expectations you quietly accept as normal. The strange part is that almost nobody remembers signing it. You don't wake up one morning and decide to become average. No child dreams of living beneath their potential. No teenager imagines spending years watching opportunities pass by while wondering where the time went. Yet millions of intelligent, capable people slowly settle into lives that feel safe enough to survive, but never meaningful enough to satisfy. The agreement doesn't announce itself, it whispers. It says tomorrow will be a better time. It says maybe someone else is naturally gifted. It says don't risk what you already have. Each whisper seems harmless. Together they become the architecture of an ordinary life. This is where the real battle begins, because the enemy isn't always outside you. It isn't your competitors, your circumstances, or your past. The strongest prison ever built is the one that convinces its prisoner there are no walls. Think about that for a moment. If someone physically chained you to a chair, you would fight with everything you had to escape. But when your limitations arrive disguised as comfort, routine, and reasonable excuses, you often welcome them without resistance. That is how silent agreements survive. They never demand your signature. They simply ask for your cooperation one ordinary day at a time. The dangerous part is that comfort has an unusual ability to disguise itself as wisdom. It convinces you that avoiding discomfort is the same as making smart decisions. It tells you to wait until you feel more confident, more prepared, more certain. Yet confidence rarely arrives before action. More often, confidence is the reward earned after repeatedly facing uncertainty. Most people spend years waiting for a feeling that only action can create. And while they're waiting, life quietly moves forward without asking permission. Every sunrise offers another opportunity to become someone different. Every sunset quietly records who you chose to become instead. Time is never standing still. Neither are you. Even when you believe nothing is changing, your habits are shaping your future with relentless consistency. This is why two people can begin from almost identical circumstances and arrive at completely different destinations. It isn't always because one possessed extraordinary intelligence. Often the difference began with invisible agreements that nobody else could see. One person agreed to temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term freedom. The other agreed to temporary comfort in exchange for long-term regret. The consequences appeared years later. History quietly repeats this lesson. Consider the young Julius Caesar before his name echoed across an empire. There was nothing inevitable about his rise. He faced uncertainty, political enemies, financial burdens, and enormous personal risk. Many men living during the same era accepted the limits that society placed before them. They believed the safest path was the wisest one. Caesar believed something entirely different. He understood that identity is shaped long before victory is recognized. Before the world calls you successful, you must repeatedly act like someone who refuses to negotiate with fear. His victories were not created on the battlefield alone. They were created in thousands of private decisions that no historian ever recorded. Those unseen decisions mattered more than the famous ones. The same principle governs every remarkable life. People celebrate visible achievements while overlooking invisible disciplines. They admire confidence without witnessing the uncertainty that came before it. And because they never see the hidden process, they mistakenly believe extraordinary people possess something unavailable to everyone else. But that's not the real difference. The deeper truth is even more powerful. Every extraordinary life begins with an invisible refusal, a refusal to accept today's identity as permanent, a refusal to let temporary failure define permanent capability, a refusal to allow fear to become an advisor. This refusal doesn't happen once, it happens every single day. You may not realize it, but every morning you stand before two agreements. One promises familiarity. It offers predictability, approval, and immediate comfort. It asks very little from you today. In return, it quietly asks for years of unrealized potential. The other agreement demands something uncomfortable immediately. It asks for discipline before motivation, courage before certainty, and persistence before evidence. It offers no guarantees in the beginning. That is why so few people choose it. Human nature has always preferred immediate rewards over distant victories. Your mind naturally searches for safety because for thousands of years, survival depended on avoiding unnecessary risk. That instinct once protected human life. Today, it often limits human potential. Your greatest opportunities rarely arrive wearing the costume of certainty. They usually arrive disguised as difficult conversations, uncomfortable decisions, unfamiliar responsibilities, and moments when you feel least prepared. Most people walk away because discomfort convinces them they're heading in the wrong direction. Most a reality. Discomfort is often proof that you finally left the territory of your old identity, and that changes everything, because growth doesn't ask whether you're comfortable, it asks whether you're willing. Imagine an archer preparing to release an arrow. Before it can move forward, it must first be pulled backward. From the outside, it appears to be moving away from its destination. Yet that backward tension creates the force needed to travel farther than it ever could otherwise. Life works in much the same way. The periods that feel like resistance are often preparing momentum. The moments that test your patience are often strengthening your character. The challenges that make you question yourself are often introducing you to a stronger version you've never met before. But only if you refuse to sign the silent agreement that says struggle is a signal to quit. Most people never realize how often they negotiate against themselves. They lower the standard just once, then they repeat it tomorrow, then next week. Eventually, what was once an exception quietly becomes their identity. Identity is never built by your biggest decision. It is built by your most repeated one. And this raises a question that is impossible to ignore. If every repeated choice is either strengthening your future or weakening it, what exactly have your daily decisions been agreeing to? Because whether you recognize it or not, your future is already reading the contract you're writing today. The uncomfortable reality is that your future does not judge your intentions. It responds to your patterns. That realization unsettles most people because intentions feel noble. Nearly everyone intends to become healthier. Nearly everyone intends to build wealth, strengthen relationships, develop confidence, or pursue meaningful work. Intentions are easy to collect because they cost nothing. Patterns are different. Patterns demand payment every single day. And life has an unusual way of rewarding what you repeatedly do, not what you repeatedly promise yourself. This is why someone can spend years talking passionately about their dreams while another person quietly builds them. From a distance, both seem equally committed. Up close, they are living under completely different agreements. One has agreed to admire success. The other has agreed to become the kind of person who creates it. That difference is invisible at first. Then, almost overnight, everyone notices. People often describe successful individuals as lucky because they arrive after the difficult years have already passed. They see the destination but rarely witness the lonely road that led there. They congratulate the victory without understanding the thousands of silent moments when quitting would have been easier than continuing. This is where most people make a fatal mistake. They assume success is an event. In reality, success is an accumulation. Imagine placing a single drop of water onto a stone. Nothing appears to happen. Add another drop, then another, then another. Days pass, weeks pass, months pass. The stone seems unchanged. Anyone watching would probably conclude that the water has no power. But continue long enough, and the impossible begins to happen. The stone yields, not because of one powerful drop, but because of relentless consistency. Your identity changes exactly the same way. One disciplined decision rarely transforms a life. 100 disciplined decisions begin to reshape a personality. 1,000 disciplined decisions create a reputation, and a reputation repeated long enough becomes destiny. Most people are waiting for dramatic transformation because dramatic transformation feels exciting, but life quietly prefers ordinary repetition. It hides extraordinary results inside painfully ordinary habits. Average doesn't look destructive. Average looks reasonable. It tells you that skipping today's effort won't matter. It tells you that beginning next Monday is close enough. It tells you that everyone else is doing the same thing. The problem is that average never arrives all at once. It arrives one permission slip at a time, one excuse, one delay, one compromise, then another, until one day you wake up wondering why your life feels smaller than your ambitions. But the hidden truth is even more surprising. The agreement isn't merely changing your actions, it's changing the story you tell yourself. Every repeated behavior becomes evidence. When you consistently avoid difficult conversations, your mind quietly concludes, I'm not the kind of person who handles conflict well. When you repeatedly abandon goals halfway through, another conclusion appears. Maybe I'm just someone who never finishes. When you hesitate every time opportunity knocks, your identity begins whispering, perhaps I'm not ready. Notice something important. None of those conclusions began as facts. They began as interpretations. Your mind constantly searches for proof about who you are. It observes your behavior and builds an identity around it. Eventually, that identity begins controlling future behavior. This creates one of the most powerful cycles in human psychology. You act according to who you believe you are. Then your actions reinforce what you already believe. The cycle continues. Someone who believes they are disciplined finds reasons to remain disciplined. Someone who believes they are unlucky notices every disappointment while overlooking every opportunity. Someone convinced they lack confidence interprets every setback as confirmation instead of temporary feedback. Without realizing it, they become both the author and the audience of the same story. This is why changing your future requires more than changing your schedule. You must interrupt the identity that keeps recreating the same results. That sounds simple. It isn't, because identity defends itself. The human mind prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar possibility. Strange as it sounds, certainty often feels safer than potential. Even when people dislike their current circumstances, those circumstances become predictable. And predictability creates emotional comfort. This explains why people remain in careers they no longer enjoy, why they stay trapped in habits they desperately want to escape, why they postpone dreams that never stop calling them. The prison is familiar. Freedom is uncertain, and uncertainty frightens the average mind more than disappointment. But there have always been people who refuse to surrender to that fear. Consider Leonardo da Vinci. History celebrates his paintings, inventions, and extraordinary imagination. Yet those accomplishments did not emerge from someone who accepted ordinary limitations. He constantly questioned assumptions that everyone else treated as permanent truths. While others saw finished answers, he saw unanswered questions. That curiosity became a competitive advantage. Most people stop asking questions because certainty feels comfortable. Great minds remain curious because curiosity expands possibility. That difference transformed an ordinary human life into one remembered centuries later. You don't need to become a genius. You need to become unwilling to let yesterday's identity decide tomorrow's possibilities. The strongest people are not fearless. They simply refuse to let fear cast the deciding vote. There is an important distinction. Fear speaks. Courage answers. Fear says, "What if you fail?" Courage quietly responds, "What if remaining the same costs even more?" That single question changes everything, because failure has a visible cost. Regret has an invisible one. Failure hurts for a season. Regret quietly follows people for decades. It appears in conversations that begin with the words, "I wish." It hides inside opportunities never pursued. It echoes through ordinary mornings when people wonder how life became so predictable. The saddest part isn't that they lacked ability. It's that they unknowingly honored an agreement they never meant to make. Every day they chose convenience over growth. Every week they postponed one meaningful decision. Every month they accepted standards they secretly wanted to escape. None of those moments seemed important. Together they shaped an entire life. But here's what almost nobody sees. The same process that builds limitation can also build freedom. If repeated compromises create average, repeated acts of courage create excellence. If identity can trap you, identity can also liberate you. And liberation rarely begins with dramatic announcements. It begins with one quiet decision, a decision that says, from this moment forward, my excuses will no longer define my future. That sounds inspiring, but inspiration alone has never transformed anyone. Action has, because the world doesn't respond to who you hope to become. It responds to who you repeatedly prove yourself to be. And this is where an unexpected discovery begins to emerge. The people who eventually create extraordinary lives are not simply chasing bigger goals. They're protecting something far more valuable, something that cannot be measured with money, titles, or recognition. Once you understand what that is, you'll never look at discipline the same way again. What the strongest people protect is not their reputation. It is not their comfort. It is not even their success. They protect the promises they make to themselves. That may sound simple, but it changes everything. Every time you tell yourself you'll wake up early, finish the project, have the difficult conversation, learn the new skill, or finally take the first step, you are making more than a plan. You are making a private promise. Nobody else may hear it. Nobody else may remember it. But your mind does, and your mind is always paying attention. When you repeatedly break those promises, something subtle begins to happen. You don't just lose progress, you lose trust in yourself. This is one of the most overlooked reasons people remain stuck. They believe they lack motivation. In reality, they lack self-trust. Think about any relationship you've ever valued. Trust wasn't built through one grand gesture. It was built through consistency. Someone showed up when they said they would. Their actions matched their words. Over time, confidence in that relationship became natural. Now ask yourself a more uncomfortable question. Would you trust someone who constantly promised to change but never followed through? Probably not. Yet many people expect their own minds to believe them after years of broken promises. I'll start tomorrow. I'll be disciplined next week. This time will be different. The words sound convincing in the moment, but your subconscious has heard them before. Eventually, it stops believing you. This is why some people feel exhausted before they even begin. They're not fighting the task in front of them. They're fighting years of accumulated doubt created by their own repeated inconsistencies. The hidden truth is that discipline is not merely about getting things done. Discipline is how you rebuild trust with yourself. Every completed promise sends a powerful message deep into your identity. I do what I say. That sentence carries enormous psychological weight, because once your mind accepts it as truth, your behavior begins to change naturally. You stop negotiating with every decision. You stop waiting for the perfect mood. You stop asking whether you feel motivated. You simply become someone whose actions match your intentions. That transformation is invisible at first, but then something remarkable begins to happen. Confidence appears. Not loud confidence, not arrogant confidence, real confidence, the kind that doesn't need approval because it has evidence. Many people misunderstand confidence. They think confidence comes before action, but confidence is memory. It is the memory of promises kept. It is the memory of difficult moments survived. It is the memory of challenges overcome. Without those memories, confidence has nothing to stand on. This explains why two people facing the same opportunity respond so differently. One hesitates, the other moves. The difference isn't necessarily talent, it's accumulated evidence. One has spent years proving reliability to themselves. The other has spent years proving hesitation. Both are simply acting in harmony with the identity they've built. This is where the silent agreement begins to crack, because the agreement keeping you average depends on one condition. It requires you to keep doubting your own ability to change. The moment you challenge that assumption, the agreement starts losing its power. History offers remarkable examples of this principle. Consider Abraham Lincoln. Before becoming one of history's most respected leaders, he experienced repeated business failures, political defeats, personal heartbreak, and setbacks that would have convinced many people to surrender their ambitions forever. Imagine if each defeat had become proof that he wasn't capable. Imagine if every loss had strengthened an identity built around failure. History would remember him very differently. Instead, each disappointment became preparation instead of definition. That distinction separated persistence from surrender. Life presents that same choice to every person, not once, repeatedly. Every setback quietly asks the same question: will this become part of your identity or part of your education? Most people answer without realizing it. They allow temporary outcomes to become permanent labels. I failed soon becomes I am a failure. I made a mistake quietly transforms into I'm not good enough. One disappointing chapter slowly becomes the title of an entire life story. But stories can be rewritten, not by pretending the past never happened, by refusing to let the past become the author of the future. This is why awareness alone is never enough. You can recognize destructive habits for years without changing them. You can understand psychology without applying it. You can watch endless videos, read countless ideas, and collect inspiring quotes while remaining exactly where you started. Knowledge without action creates the illusion of progress, and illusions are dangerous because they feel productive. You convince yourself you're preparing, learning, planning, waiting for the perfect moment. But preparation has an expiration date. Eventually, it becomes procrastination, wearing a disguise. The strongest people understand something most others overlook. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. You rarely think your way into a better life. You behave your way into one. That idea challenges everything modern comfort wants you to believe. Comfort tells you to wait until you feel certain. Growth tells you certainty arrives after commitment. Comfort says protect your current identity. Growth says outgrow it. Comfort asks, what if this doesn't work? Growth asks, who will I become if I keep going? Those are completely different conversations. One keeps your attention trapped in today's fears. The other directs it toward tomorrow's possibilities. There is another reason average holds so many people captive. It quietly lowers their standards without them noticing. At first, the difference is almost impossible to detect. You miss one workout, then another. You postpone reading one book, then another. You delay making one important phone call, then another. Individually, each decision seems insignificant. Collectively, they reshape your character. Character is nothing more than repeated behavior observed over time. It isn't built during moments when life feels easy. It is revealed when nobody is watching, when no applause is coming, when no reward is immediate. That is where real transformation begins, not on stages, not in front of audiences, but in quiet rooms where nobody will ever know the decision you made except you. And strangely enough, those private moments become public results months and years later. People see the outcome. They never see the countless invisible victories that created it. This is why extraordinary lives often appear mysterious. They are not mysterious. They are simply built where few people are willing to work. But an even deeper realization is waiting just beneath the surface. Because there is one habit so ordinary, so common, and so socially accepted that it silently renews the agreement with mediocrity every single day. Most people never recognize it. Yet once you do, you'll understand why changing this one pattern can alter the direction of your entire life. That habit is postponement. Not because you are lazy, not because you don't care, but because postponement quietly convinces you that time will always be more generous tomorrow than it is today. It is one of the greatest illusions the human mind has ever accepted. You tell yourself you'll begin when life becomes less complicated, when work slows down, when your finances improve, when you have more confidence, when the children are older, when the timing feels right, and every one of those reasons sounds completely reasonable. That's why postponement is so dangerous. It rarely appears as fear. It appears as logic. It disguises itself as responsibility. It wears the mask of preparation. It even sounds intelligent. But beneath every delay is an unspoken belief that tomorrow owes you another opportunity. Life has never made that promise. The future is generous to those who prepare for it, but it is never guaranteed to those who assume it will arrive exactly as planned. This is why so many people wake up one morning shocked by the passage of time. Years disappear so quietly that you hardly notice them leaving. One birthday becomes another. One January becomes the next. The dreams that once felt urgent slowly become memories of things you meant to do. The tragedy isn't always failure. Often it's unfinished potential. It's knowing you carried abilities that never became reality. It's realizing the person you could have become remained a stranger because you kept introducing yourself to tomorrow instead of today. The hidden truth is that life is always asking one question, not whether you have talent, not whether you have intelligence, not whether you have perfect circumstances, but whether you are willing to act before certainty arrives. This is where history quietly separates ordinary lives from extraordinary ones. Consider the great explorers who sailed into oceans that no accurate map could describe. When Ferdinand Magellan's expedition left familiar shores, there were no guarantees waiting beyond the horizon. There were storms no one had charted, waters no one had crossed, and dangers no one could predict. If certainty had been a requirement, the voyage would never have begun. Progress demanded movement before proof. That principle has never changed. Every meaningful achievement in human history began before someone possessed complete certainty. Inventors experimented before they knew an invention would succeed. Entrepreneurs invested before they knew a business would survive. Leaders stepped forward before they knew others would follow. Parents raised children without a perfect manual. Artists created masterpieces without knowing whether anyone would understand them. Life has always rewarded those willing to move while answers were still incomplete. Yet average thinking waits. It waits for confidence. It waits for permission. It waits for perfect timing. It waits until risk disappears. But risk never disappears. It simply changes form. The risk of trying is visible. The risk of never trying remains invisible until years have passed, and invisible risks are often the most expensive. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain. The summit disappears into clouds. You cannot see the final stretch of the climb. You cannot predict every obstacle waiting ahead. Would refusing to take the first step somehow reveal the entire path? Of course not. Only movement reveals the next section of the trail. Life operates by the same principle. Clarity rarely arrives before commitment. It arrives because of commitment. This is why so many people remain trapped inside overthinking. They believe one more day of analysis will eliminate uncertainty. Instead, it often strengthens hesitation. Thought has extraordinary power, but thought without action slowly becomes its own prison. The strongest minds know when to stop analyzing and start advancing. They understand that momentum is one of the most valuable psychological forces a person can create. Momentum changes how you see yourself. The first disciplined action feels difficult. The fifth feels manageable. The 50th begins to feel natural. Eventually, what once demanded enormous effort becomes part of your identity. That is how silent agreements are broken. Not through one dramatic declaration, but through repeated evidence that your old identity is no longer in control. There is another misconception that quietly keeps people average. Many believe success is built by extraordinary opportunities. In reality, it is usually built by ordinary opportunities treated extraordinarily well. Benjamin Franklin did not become influential because every opportunity was remarkable. He developed himself continuously while others remained satisfied with yesterday's knowledge. He understood that every day either compounds your value or slowly diminishes it. Compounding isn't only financial. Character compounds, discipline compounds, knowledge compounds, reputation compounds, relationships compound, confidence compounds, so do excuses, so does procrastination, so does inconsistency. Whether you're aware of it or not, something in your life is always compounding. The only question is whether it is building the future you want or quietly constructing one you'll eventually regret. This realization changes how you see ordinary days. Most people underestimate Tuesday afternoons. They underestimate quiet mornings. They underestimate evenings when nobody is watching. Yet those ordinary hours determine extraordinary futures. Championships are celebrated under bright lights. They are built long before anyone enters the stadium. Businesses are admired after they become successful. They are built during lonely seasons when no one believes in the vision. Strong character is praised during moments of crisis. It is developed during peaceful moments when compromise would have been easier. The visible moment is never where the real work begins. It is simply where invisible work becomes impossible to hide. That is why comparisons are so misleading. You compare your beginning to someone else's result. You compare today's struggle to another person's years of preparation. You compare your private doubts to someone else's public confidence. Those comparisons steal your attention from the only life you are responsible for building. The only comparison that creates growth is this: are you becoming stronger than the person you were yesterday? Not perfect, not finished, simply stronger. Because perfection has never been the requirement. Progress has. Every meaningful transformation begins with a single refusal. A refusal to keep repeating the patterns that no longer serve the future you want. But there is one final truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It is the truth that finally destroys the silent agreement once and for all. And once you fully accept it, returning to your old way of thinking becomes almost impossible. The final truth is both liberating and unsettling. No one is coming to rescue you. Not because people don't care, not because the world is unfair, but because your life has always been waiting for the one person who has been present in every decision you've ever made: you. That realization carries an extraordinary kind of freedom. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to change your circumstances, you recover something many people unknowingly surrender: the power to shape your own future. For years, you may have believed the missing piece was external: a better opportunity, a different economy, more support, more recognition, more time, more resources. Those things can certainly help, but they cannot replace the one thing every meaningful life requires: personal responsibility. This is where the silent agreement finally loses its grip, because the agreement survives only as long as you believe your future depends more on circumstances than on your choices. The moment that belief begins to disappear, something remarkable happens. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" You begin asking, "What can I do next?" That single question has changed more lives than almost any strategy ever created. It shifts your attention away from blame and toward possibility. Away from excuses and toward ownership. Away from wishing and toward building. Most people underestimate the power of ownership because it feels heavy in the beginning. Accepting responsibility means you can no longer hide behind yesterday's disappointments or tomorrow's promises. It requires you to stand face to face with your own decisions, but hidden inside that responsibility is something priceless: freedom. Because if your choices helped create your current reality, your choices can also create a different one. That is the truth. Average thinking fears the most. Average survives by convincing you that change is impossible. Growth begins the moment you prove otherwise. Think about the blacksmith shaping a sword. The steel doesn't become stronger because it avoids the fire. It becomes stronger because it passes through it. Every strike of the hammer removes weakness. Every moment inside the flame reshapes what the metal is capable of becoming. If the steel could speak, it might mistake the process for destruction. In reality, it is becoming something greater than it was before. Life often works the same way. The challenges you wanted to escape may have been developing the patience you now possess. The failures you tried to forget may have been teaching the wisdom success alone could never provide. The disappointments that tested your confidence may have been revealing strengths you didn't know existed. Looking backward, the painful moments often make more sense than they did while you were living through them. But there is a difference between learning from hardship and allowing hardship to define you. The strongest people carry their lessons forward. They leave their limitations behind. That choice belongs to you. Every single day. Not once. Not occasionally. Every day, every morning you wake up, the silent agreement quietly waits for your signature again. It asks you to lower your standards just this once, to ignore your goals for one more day, to settle for being almost disciplined, almost courageous, almost committed, almost focused. The dangerous word has never been never. It has always been almost. Almost keeps people comfortable enough to stay where they are and dissatisfied enough to wonder why life never changes. But today you have an opportunity to reject that agreement, not with dramatic words, with ordinary actions, because extraordinary lives are built from ordinary actions repeated with extraordinary consistency. Imagine where your life could be 1 year from now if you became someone who honored every meaningful promise you made to yourself. Imagine the confidence that would replace hesitation. Imagine waking up without negotiating whether to do what matters. Imagine walking into opportunities with quiet certainty, not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. That future is not reserved for a gifted few. It belongs to the people willing to become different before their circumstances do. The world has always responded to identity before achievement. When you consistently think like a disciplined person, you begin acting like one. When you repeatedly act like one, you become one. And once that identity is established, your results begin to reflect it. That is why the greatest transformation never starts in your bank account. It starts in your beliefs. It starts in your standards. It starts in the invisible conversations you have with yourself when nobody else is listening, because those conversations become decisions. Those decisions become habits. Those habits become character, and character quietly becomes destiny. Years from now, people may look at your life and call you fortunate. They may say you were in the right place at the right time. They may admire your confidence, your discipline, your achievements, or your resilience. What they will never fully see are the invisible moments that created all of it. They won't see the mornings you chose action instead of excuses. They won't see the evenings when you continued despite exhaustion. They won't see the countless times you refused to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. Those moments will remain unseen, but they will never be insignificant, because that is where your future is created, not in one dramatic breakthrough, not in one perfect opportunity, but in the quiet decisions nobody applauds. So ask yourself one final question. If every repeated choice is a vote for the person you're becoming, who have you been voting for? The answer is already shaping your future. If you don't like that answer, remember this. You are never trapped by yesterday's vote. You are only limited by the belief that today's vote doesn't matter. It does, more than you realize, because the life you dream about is not waiting for perfect conditions. It is waiting for a different version of you, a version that no longer bargains with comfort, a version that keeps promises even when motivation disappears. A version that understands discipline is not punishment. It is self-respect in action. A version that no longer signs silent agreements with mediocrity simply because they feel familiar. That version of you is not years away. It is one decision away, not a decision made once and forgotten, a decision renewed every morning, a decision strengthened every evening, a decision reflected in ordinary moments that quietly become an extraordinary life. So when you leave this moment, don't ask whether you feel inspired. Ask yourself something far more important. What is the very next action that proves you've stopped negotiating with the life you were meant to live? Take that action today, then take another tomorrow, and another the day after that, because the silent agreement that kept you average has only one source of power: your continued permission. Withdraw that permission and watch what becomes possible.